When you're writing or planning a story, what's one of the hardest parts? One of the most identified difficulties in writing and planning stories is writers giving a strong plot structure and having good timing throughout the whole story. The timing is one of the most important parts to engaging the readers throughout the journey of the story and in creating good tension. So it's really important to make sure that you've got a few techniques that you can use to help you create a good, strong plot structure and timing throughout your story. I'm Sarah, and my author name is Serenkasa, and I'm a writer, proofreader and publishing assistant at a local Australian indie publishing company. I work quite closely with a few editors, and also as a writing mentor, I've had quite a few people question me about creating a strong plot or having good timing throughout their story. This was something that I originally struggled with. I knew, of course, about the 3-stage plot structure. You've obviously got the beginning, the middle, and the end. But within that, I wanted to know more about where do certain parts of a story take place. So did loads of research and came across a couple of handy tips and hints that I turned into a structure in my own writing planning, and I thought I'd share it with you today. So if you want to know a little bit more about creating a good strong plot structure and good timing in your story, whether it's for a school project or for an actual book that you want to get published, stay tuned. First, in creating a good solid story, it's always a good idea to sum up your story in one sentence. A lot of authors actually find it really difficult to sum up their story in such a small, tiny way. They know what they want to happen overall, they've got so many ideas, and summing it up in just one sentence is actually quite difficult. So I would always recommend doing this first. So just one sentence, no details, what's the basic essence of the story, forget about everything else. For example, a princess goes on a quest to rescue her kidnapped brother. That's a really good example of one sentence to sum up the story, because you know the main character, you know what she's doing, she's going on a quest, and you know why she's doing it, what her purpose is, and it's to save her little brother who has been kidnapped. So have a go at this with yours. It's always a good way to start off planning your story. I also like to do it for every now and again to remind myself of the story. Sometimes when you're writing, they change, so it's a good way to just rein yourself back in and remember what you're doing. Of course, one of the most popular story structures is that 3-structure plot, which we talked about a minute ago, the beginning, the middle, and an end. And quite often you will use this to write your story. So the next stage, once you've got your one sentence, you're going to expand it into 3. What happens at the beginning of your story? Just write one sentence for that. What happens in the middle of your story? Again, just write one sentence for that. And what happens at the end of your story? Just write one sentence for that. For example, the beginning of my example story could be the princess of Elstrath finds out that her little brother was kidnapped by an enemy kingdom when he was visiting allies. It's just one sentence. It tells you what happens at the beginning. You know who she is, where she is, and what happened to her brother that makes her go on her journey. That's all you need to do, just one sentence. The second sentence is everything that happens in the middle. So she defeats lots of challenges and hiccups when she's going on the journey. She meets new people and she finds out more about herself perhaps. And same again at the end, write one sentence for the ending. So in our example, perhaps the princess has to find a way to persuade the enemy kingdom to give her brother back. Perhaps if she goes in all swords blazing, she might start a war. So I'd write just one sentence about that too. Still working in tiny numbers, still just got 3 short sentences for that basic 3-stage plot. Now I mentioned earlier, it can be difficult to know what you're doing in terms of book timing if you use just the 3-stage plot structure. And of course, you know, I wanted to know where would the climax happen, or where would the most major hiccup happen, or how many hurdles would I do before the climax, you know, all these things, and wanted to make sure the timing was correct. And upon researching, I found Michael Hauge's 6-stage plot structure that was actually really useful to use. It gives you rough percentages on where you can include things in your story, and I find it really helpful to work with. So Once you've got your 3 sentences, which gives you a basic idea of what you're doing in your story, you can then use Michael Hauge's 6-stage plot structure if you want to give you a bit more of a guide. Please remember that none of this is definite. It doesn't have to be exactly the percentage that he says that you have to do something. Just roughly around there gives you a good guide. I find with any forms of creativity, having a few boundaries and guides really helps you go through, otherwise it can feel really overwhelming. That's the whole idea as well of starting off with a blank page. It's really difficult to start writing, but if you put a few percentages of roughly plot points where they should go, it's going to be a little bit easier to get going. So without further ado, the 6-stage plot structure, give it a go. The first one is 10%. So 10% into your story is going to be the first opportunity. This is where the hints of the story, the plot, and what the character is going to do start to come into play. So whatever they're going to do, it's got to be hinted. Everything up until then is set up and beginning. That's when it stops. Next one, 25%. So that's number 2. That's turning point 2 is they go. Quite often this is plans change. Maybe the character didn't originally plan to go on their journey and then they go. Or this is where they have to go. This is the basic place where your characters are going to start their journey, no matter what they're doing. Number 3 is turning point 3. That's at 50%. At 50% is the point of no return. The character's been through so much that there's no point in going back. You know, you've had your hurdles to begin with, and the characters overcome them. They're halfway. Number 4, turning point 4, is everything goes wrong. This is the major setback. Have you noticed that in every story at around about that 75% mark, it all falls to pieces, the characters hurt, they don't know what they're doing, they're lost, or something's happened that's really gone wrong, and it really ramps up the tension before the main climax. And that's exactly what you want to do. At 75%, what could go wrong for your characters, make it all go wrong, and then they've got to like crawl back and really show their tenacity in working towards the main climax. Number 5 is the climax. That's around about the 90% to the 98% mark. It's quite big because it's the main climax bit. Often this is the big battle, the bit where everything happens. They put all of their effort into that final thing to make their goal come true. So that's at that 90 to 98% mark. And then finally, number 6 of the 6-stage plot structure is the resolution. That's the 98% to the 100%, which when you actually get writing, it feels really short and you've got to sum up everything in that tiny time. So does it end better off for your characters? Or if you're feeling really cruel, does it end up worse for them? And that's it. You've got 6 percentage guides of places in your story where you could add main plot points. So you've got the 10%, things get go, the opportunity is mentioned, hinted. 25% is when they go off on their journey. 50% is the point of no return. They've been through too much to go back. 75%, everything goes wrong. 90 to 98% is that big climax, big battle, everything gets solved, and 98 to 100% is the resolution. How does the story end? I find this really useful in my writing, and I've recommended it to a few people when I mentor them, or even to my dad who's wanted to start writing recently, and bossy daughter's decided to give him a bit of a nudge by handing him her planning sheet. So I recommend giving this a go. The 6 stages, again, doesn't have to be exact, they're just a really good guiding point. And if you're wondering whether this would actually happen in the real world, you know, what kind of current authors and stories that you might know do actually use this, whether they were deliberately using it or whether it's just a generic good story structure that we're used to. I had a look at the old bookcase and thought, I'm going to turn through a few books that I've actually read recently. I checked it out with Circe by Madeline Miller, and at about that 25% mark was when she left. She went off on her journey, whatever it was, by her choice or not. Then I thought, okay, I'm going to try another one, and I checked out The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Again, that 10% mark, that's that first, the hints of the journey. Someone did indeed come in with hints of the journey that would be going forth, and at the 25% mark was it them roughly leaving to go on their adventure. Okay, thought of another one, had a look at stories like Skyward by Brandon Sanderson and a couple of others that I know, and sure enough it's that 75% mark where everything goes wrong, the character's downtrodden, it feels like they're never going to win. So it does seem to be out there. Guaranteed it's not page 100 out of 400, 25% if they're not off their journey, that's awful. It's just a rough guide to help you write it, and then you can go from there. So give it a go, see what you think. So I'll say it again. Number one, just really basic single sentence. What happens in your entire story? Next, expand that into 3 sentences for the beginning, the middle, and the end. Tell yourself a little bit more about that 3-stage plot. What's happening? After that, to help with your timing, so you've got your plot structure and you've got your timing, definitely give it a go with Michael Hauge's 6-stage plot structure. I find it really useful to give me guides, that 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 90 to 98%, 98 to 100%. Again, doesn't need to be exact, it's just really good to give you a point as you go, and then in between there your creativity can do whatever you want. I'm not much of a planner, but I do find this great, and I just give myself these few basic points to help guide me, and then what happens in the rest. And then you can add a few hurdles here and there as well, so I don't know, maybe 30% add in a hurdle, 45% add in a bigger hurdle to give a little bit more tension in your stories. Finally, you may be wondering why percentages might be useful and how you can figure that out. Well, in the publishing industry, it's very common to write your story to word count. For example, as a fantasy writer, my word count is recommended as 80,000 words to 125,000 words, which is a bit on the far end. I tend to work towards 100,000 words because that's the boundary. After that, after about 100,000 words, it gets really expensive to edit and produce books. So that 100,000 words is kind of a sweet spot. It's also really good for maths because, 10% is that 10,000 words, something should be happening. 25%, 25,000 words, the next thing should happen. It's really easy for maths. But it does work for shorter ones. I did it for my 1,000 word children's book, just more of a squished version, and it really helped me with that. Helps you focus on your timing, and you could do it with a 5,000 word short story. Again, it'll just be tighter and faster paced, but it's really good at giving up that tension. So if you want to improve your plot structure and your timing, really give it a go and tell me what you think below. See you next time. Be creative.